Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following everything happening with the latest gaming hardware. I'm Daemon Hatfield, and this week I'm joined by Max Scoville, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Thanks for having me.
And Destin Legarie from IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Bam! Thanks for having me, Daemon.
And do we have a doozy of a lead topic for you this week? You've probably heard by now, Sony has pulled Concord from sale and is shutting down the servers today, the day this episode goes live on September 6th. That's just 2 weeks after the game was launched. It is one of Sony's big first-party game releases of the year. Not even given a 2-week chance to find its footing. Of course, it did have a very disastrous launch. Steam all-time peak concurrent users sits at 697 players, and I think the day after it was released, so couldn't even crack 700 concurrents on Steam. Analyst tells us it sold at probably 25,000 units. At $40 a pop, that comes out to exactly $1 million. Director Ryan Ellis said, while many qualities of the experience resonated with players, we also recognize that other aspects of the game and our initial launch didn't land the way we'd intended. So, I don't think there's much point debating why this game failed. I think the reasons are obvious. Hero shooters were exciting in 2016. Concord arrives very late to the party with no popular IP attached to it like Marvel Rivals. Concord's a very generic name. Doesn't tell anything about the game, anyone about the game. People didn't like the characters in this game, and that's kind of important in a hero shooter. The heroes are supposed to be really cool and likable. The curious might have tried it out if it were free to play, but they slapped a price on it. And finally, I think Sony did very little marketing for this game. It was fully revealed in May of this year, but then just sort of was quietly released during Gamescom, the biggest game show of the year, where Sony didn't even have a booth. I'm not in marketing. I think the obvious choice would be maybe Sony might want to have had this game there, get lots of people playing it, get lots of people excited the week that was going to be out. But who am I? I'm not a marketer for Sony, so. I think it's more interesting to discuss why Sony is abandoning this game so soon, not even really giving it a chance to find its footing. Max, I start with you. What happened here?
The big question is, who was this game for? And I think the Overwatch comparison is an obvious one. The general sort of Guardians of the Galaxy of it all was kind of something that jumped out at me. What's funny is to look back at the initial reveal for this game. The very first glimpse we got of it was this completely sort of ambiguous, nebulous, like literally in a nebula, this ship traveling through space. We had no idea what this game was. We heard it was a first-person shooter of some variety, something multiplayer flavored. And the thing that people were talking about for the better part of a year about this game, following its announcement, was the CGI cheeseburger that was shown in the trailer, which is quite a literal nothing burger, as it turns out. Then we got this sort of the big reveal of the cinematic narrative cutscenes that were going to be holding this thing together, which, you know, admittedly looked pretty slick, and then that immediately tossed into gameplay that really, I think, left a lot of people cold. And again, hero shooters were the new hotness back in 2016 when this game was early in development. I think they spent something like 8 years making this thing. Yeah, back then that was also there was one Guardians of the Galaxy movie out, and then there was another one that people were looking forward to, and now we are like, that team has disbanded in the MCU. Like, we're so far beyond that. And anybody who is actually like hankering for a Guardians of the Galaxy game, we got one of those in like 2018.
It was great.
And then if you want to play a new hero shooter featuring Marvel characters, there's one coming out in December. Marvel Rivals is right around the corner. So it's just it just feels like the answer to a question that nobody asked, aside from, I don't know, maybe some VCs or board members. It very much looks like a product for the sake of being a product. And it sucks because clearly a lot of people worked really hard on it. It is definitely polished. I saw a photo on Reddit that people were being a little bit snarky of, which is a screen cap of the IGN review that Travis Northup did, giving it a 7, saying it was good. That was never the issue. It's not the fact that it's a broken game or an inherently bad game. It's just that a game that nobody really wants to play. And when it is a strictly multiplayer game, not having people to play it is kind of a big issue. But that's a bigger problem outside of the game itself. That's sort of a societal infrastructure type of problem. And it's funny because, Sony's clearly been betting really big on live service games. We heard at one point that they had, I think, 12 of them in development. We've since heard that they've halved that. They had a huge win earlier this year with Helldivers, which up until the halfway point of the year, or at least last I checked, was the best-selling game of the year, period. So clearly, live service isn't inherently the issue here. It's more just making games that people actually want to play. And you can look at this game for 3 seconds and you see how expensive it is. Mm-hmm. It is clearly a very polished, even if you hate the character designs, like a lot of work went into this game. It looks like it's been cooking for the better part of a decade. But then it's also, you look at I don't know, the games that blow up on Steam. You look at something like Pal World, like AAA polish is not necessarily the thing that gets people gravitating towards games. There's frequently runaway hits on Steams that are arguably like games as a service that are kind of janky, and that doesn't matter if people are having a good time. This just kind of feels like that final paper that you spent all night working on. You really just wanted to get everything perfect, get it totally right, and then you wound up not turning it in on time and failing the class. So yeah, big flop for Sony. Not surprising, kind of looking at the timeline of events here. Skipping Gamescom again, that was sort of a big canary in a coal mine moment. The fact that Sony didn't even decide to get this in front of people. So yeah, it's sad. And I hope that it also kind of serves as a warning, because like we see so many games pop up as live service projects and then quickly just keel over and die, or we start sort of hearing the beginnings of their death rattle, so to speak. Foam Stars was a big PS5 and PC and PS4 game that launched earlier this year. And again, it's a games as a service. It is a game. It is sort of like Splatoon, but it's foamy. And come on in, everybody, and check it out and play it. And that just recently flipped the switch to free to play, because people, I'm guessing, weren't paying money to buy it and to play it. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, as you say, in this case, it doesn't seem to be an issue of quality, because we did give it a 7 out of 10, and I should point out that is right in line with all other reviewers. It has a 67 on Metacritic, so basically everyone was giving this about a 7. Not a bad game. It's just a game, like Max pointed out, just a game that nobody was asking for, nobody was looking for, and didn't have an audience to actually release out to. Destin, Xbox is no stranger to stepping on rakes, as Ryan McCaffrey likes to say. What was sort of your reaction to this unprecedented news earlier this week?
I have no idea who this game was ever made for. You just look at it, and right away, the characters feel bland, boring, and derivative. Everybody was calling it a Guardians of the Galaxy knockoff from the first trailer revealing the characters. They did not like the interaction between the characters, so I'm left wondering, was there ever focus testing done on this? Were they getting positive reinforcement? Because I didn't see any positivity toward it from the initial trailer. So once you launch the game and you see their version of Drax, and we get a peek at the cinematics with these characters we have no connection to, we don't understand the relationship. And I saw somebody online compare it to jumping into season 3 of a television show, and you're just expected to have some connection to whoever these characters are supposed to be, and you just don't. So it fails on a storytelling perspective. And I actually don't really agree with Travis Northup's review completely. I think that the gameplay feels very slow, and I think the more you play and you get matched with, stacked teams and such, at least as a solo player, it becomes much less fun. In addition, there are modes where they tried something new, and it would lock you completely out of using a character a second time, trying to shake up the sandbox. But you know what I don't like being told to do by a video game? Not play as my favorite character. So, there were just so many strange decisions made with Concord that I don't understand. But at the end of the day, everybody basically said, we don't want to pay $40 to play this. And they didn't. And that's the only thing you can really do as a consumer, not buy things that aren't of interest to you.
It's not the first game to stumble out the gate, although, it definitely has maybe the biggest stumble. But, I think of other games that have had comebacks, games like No Man's Sky, Cyberpunk, Final Fantasy XIV. I think in these cases, the developers put their heads down and they just quietly get to work improving their game, and eventually, after some period of time, the game is in a good place and is sort of welcomed again by its community. But here, Sony is
what community?
Well, I'm just saying.
There is no community.
Okay.
It capped off. It's under 700 players on Steam. Clearly, this is not resonating with people. I don't see a world where this game goes offline, they put their heads down, and they come back, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, I love Concord!" all of a sudden, the people who were willing to buy the game have made their voices clear and said, "I'm not going to."
Yeah. No, I mean, to No Man's Sky, Cyberpunk, Final Fantasy XIV, all of these were things that people wanted. These were games that were, if anything, they underdelivered, or they launched in a rough state. But the idea of I I don't know, the people who made The Witcher doing a big open world futuristic game, or a Final Fantasy MMO. These are like things that are like, okay, I'm in. What is Concord? Like, who is this again? Who is this for? And even if it was just try to kind of loop people in the most basic, just the tiniest bit of curiosity, $40 is going to prevent that. And I mean, when Overwatch has gone free to play, when everything else is free to play, it's just there's barely any pull to draw people in, and there's a big, huge paywall right in front of them actually checking it out of morbid curiosity. Like, had this even launched as just a perk on PlayStation Plus, which again, Sony has a subscription service. It seems like maybe that could have benefited. Like a bunch of great games as a service have actually gotten a good boost from PlayStation Plus. Rocket League and Fall Guys both launched as PlayStation Plus games, and those are the kind of games that if you were charging $40 for them or $20 for them, with no opportunity to check them out, just kind of like, I'll take it for a spin. I don't see those games ever having taken off, but they were able to kind of attract a active player base because there was an easy way to get on board, an easy way to check it out. You look at another big competitor to Concord is Apex Legends, and that, when it dropped, it came out of nowhere, which again just made a big kind of splash on its own. And again, it was from a reputable studio, it's from Respawn. So people are like, what did you hear about Apex Legends? I don't know. What's that? Oh, it's like a battle royale, but it's in the Titanfall universe. Cool.
And Valve also released Deadlock, which is invite only, and it's behind a lock system to get in. And last I checked, it had like 90,000 concurrents, putting it regularly in the top 10 games on SteamDB. So you have people like Valve also entering this market, and guess what? That game's free. So that's what you're up against. And when you come out and you're like, well, you got to pay $40 to play this one. Why?
Yeah, no, there's a hubris on Sony's part, which we see on a pretty regular basis, where it's almost like somebody up there was just expecting people to care. They were like, oh yeah, there's a brand new first party PlayStation 5 multiplayer game. It's coming out in August, $40. But like, that's not enough to move the needle. That's not going to get people excited or on board. That's not I don't know. There's no there. Meanwhile, Valve being like, we put out a new game. Everyone loses their mind because Valve doesn't put out a new game ever so often. They don't do that much. So something to care about.
It could be that in this case, Sony just could not afford to keep this game running with the player count so low, because this is Firewalk Studios. It's their first game. They were formed in 2018, so that's why the math about it being in development for 8 years doesn't really add up. It would have had to start in 2016, but the studio was founded in 2018. Whatever. This is their first game, so they've had no money coming in, no revenue, except for whatever investment capital they had, and then of course Sony bought them last year. So like, this is it. They've got no money coming in, and it may just be that Sony can't afford to keep it running, because Guha Bella from Velen Studios, they made Knockout City, which is, they know something about launching a live service game and then having some issues with it. He told GamesIndustry.biz that a 50-person team would amount to about $500,000 a month just in labor costs. Based on that, he estimates a $20 game would need to sell $25,000 a month to match this. Concord had a $40 price tag, and Firewalk Studios has at least 150 staff. So it could just be that Sony just could not afford to keep this game running.
Yeah, of course not. I mean, they made $1 million. They likely cost at least $100 million.
On the low end.
Like some people are saying $200 million, plus they purchased the studio to make this product, and I just don't think there's any salvaging it. It's just too low of a retention rate, and I don't see how you get players interested in this. The fact of the matter is, Concord is not cool to play or have any interaction with, and that's how people feel about it.
So what?
We've seen this.
Go ahead, Max.
I was going to say, do you remember Paragon, the sort of MOBA-style hero shooter that Epic put out, and then subsequently said, never mind, and then I think issued refunds? And I think the cool thing they did there was they made the assets free for people to use in Unreal or whatever. But yeah, like that was there. I don't think there was any ill will towards that game. It just didn't attract a player base. And again, like, Epic has a little bit of they got a cushion to fall back on. They're not really hurting there. The people are, as long as people are using Unreal, that's fine. And clearly they got back on their feet with Fortnite after that. But yeah, this just strikes me as Sony just pulling the ripcord as hard as possible, because they are already in the hole with this game, and it's coming out just not even keeping itself afloat. This thing sunk like a brick. And yeah, I'm wondering if this is, you can give a game like this the benefit of the doubt. Maybe we'll see it reemerge as some kind of a free-to-play thing, but there's so much just negativity surrounding it. The reputation this game has is as one of the biggest failures in video game history, and it's not even like there's room for a redemption arc. Like it's again, No Man's Sky, Cyberpunk, these are things that people desperately wanted, and if anything, they were victims of really high expectations that came back to bite them. And in this case, the product reveal was a nothing burger flying through space. Like who would want this? So I'm thinking this is going to be more one of those David Zaslav style write-offs. But yeah, again, I wanted to see Coyote versus Acme. I didn't want to play Concord. I didn't care. I don't, no, there's one thing I want to touch on about this game, and it just strikes me as just a kind of incongruous product. Aside from the fact that it's either generic or the style, the designs aren't for everybody, the pairing of a fast-paced or medium-paced multiplayer shooter with weekly narrative cutscenes are just antithetical. Like the people who are after narrative storytelling and beautifully polished cutscenes, like speaking as one of those people, you play single-player games. Yeah. Multiplayer, you want rock solid gameplay. You want something fast paced. You don't want something getting in the way, stopping you down to tell you, hold your hand and tell you a story. The Overwatch vignettes, I could be wrong, but I feel like those kind of came after the fact. There were a handful of them floating around, but that game launched with a kind of a cool starter pack of action figures. I think it was 12 people on the roster at first, and they gradually trickled out these little shorts, giving you a little bit more context. But it was always gameplay first, story second. And in this case, this was one of the big selling points, was we're going to get a new, highly polished cutscene every week. Dude, Fortnite doesn't even do that. Fortnite does like a new cutscene every like 4 months or something. They do that with a season pass. This is no.
Yeah, and when we did get those cutscenes, the writing was, I'll just say, profoundly bad. It was just not interesting or engaging whatsoever. You have no idea who the characters are. There's no reason to latch on to any of them, and they don't really give you a reason to appreciate who they are as individuals in the game. So they even failed with that.
Destin, how do we compare this to Redfall? Maybe that's probably the most high-profile, disaster release for Xbox in recent years. Concord actually reviewed a little bit better than Redfall. It has a 64 on OpenCritic as opposed to 57 for Redfall. But Redfall's still here, even though Arcane Austin has unfortunately been shut down. You can still play Redfall today, and it's actually in better shape than it was because, like I said, the developers just quietly worked on it, and they updated it, and there was even a final update that provided that offline mode. This is great B-roll, by the way, that we're seeing right here.
Yeah, I mean, Redfall was equally problematic. It's a game that came out that I'm not sure people wanted from Arcane Austin, which no longer exists, and we saw what happened with Arcane Austin, unfortunately. And I do wonder where this leaves the development studio, Firewalk, which is now part of the PlayStation family, as we've recently seen another failure with Suicide Squad and how WB has decided to move forward with that. So it's just really, really unfortunate that these games are coming out and they're trying to break into new genres, but they're doing so in a way that doesn't work. Like, it doesn't work for the studios who are making those games, and it doesn't resonate with players, and it's disastrous for these companies. So, like I said at the beginning of the show, I don't understand how this ever got greenlit, how this got past focus testing, and how nobody just said, hey, I don't like this.
Well, I don't know what this means for Firewalk Studios. This, like I said, was their only game. I think it's probably inevitable that we'll be hearing about layoffs at some point in the future, which is very unfortunate. I'll be very sorry to hear about that. But I just don't really see what Firewalk Studios is going to be doing in place of Concord. But Matt,
and they have the secret level short to look forward to, which will feature Concord.
Exactly, this is the show. This is the Love, Death, and Robots anthology show. Yeah.
What really sucks about this is the people who made the decision to make this game what it was are the ones who are way above the pay grade of the people who actually made the game, who are going to get laid off. And that sucks. It's the same deal with Redfall. It's the same deal with Suicide Squad. And in both those cases, I don't know, I was like, hey, what if the people who made Dishonored made a vampire game that you can play with your friends? Okay, cool. That's a neat idea. Suicide Squad. whatever. Yeah, Rocksteady wants to try their hand at again. There's some semblance of like a kernel of a good idea there. In this case, I don't know what the initial appeal was aside from just trying to cash in on the most lucrative looking games as a service, live service model that was the hot thing 6-7 years ago.
I know. I mean, Sony, they bought Firewalk just last April, I believe. Someone at Sony looked at this and said, yes, we will pay money for Concord and release it next summer. But Max, on the flip side of all this bad news for Sony, we should mention that Astrobot is out now, and it's just fantastic.
Astrobot's killer.
It got 9 out of 10 from IGN.
Yeah, and if you want to take it for a spin and you haven't, just load up Astro's Playroom. There's your free-to-play demo of what that game is like, because it's just that, but for 4 times as long.
Oh yeah,
and PlayStation does deserve props for offering full refunds for Concord and taking it offline and just saying, hey, we're going to give you your money back. We're going to eat this one and move forward however we need to.
Crazy, crazy times. I've been covering this business for a long time. I can't, like I said, I think this is an unprecedented move to pull a huge first-party game with such short amount of time actually being available on the market. Let's revisit the poll from last episode. You were talking about all these PlayStation 5 Pro leaks. We asked the audience, what are you willing to pay for a truly next-gen PS5 Pro? And 63% of you are willing to pay nothing, not interested in a PS5 Pro. Which is a little bit interesting because we've been talking about who, no one was asking for Concord. Sony went ahead and put Concord out. I don't know, Max, is Sony going to put out a PS5 Pro even though no one seems to want that?
What if I told you that the PS5 Pro could run Concord at 8K, 120 frames? Oh, never mind. Sorry, Concord's offline. Yeah. I don't know who the PS5 Pro is for either. So I would love to be wowed, blown away, but I'm also, again, it's that good old PS3 era Sony hubris.
Yep.
It's for people buying GTA 6 in their console at the same time. That's what it's for. I
guess so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. People who have been holding out for this long. 28% would be willing to spend $550 to $600. 5% would be willing to pay $650 to $700, and 3.4% claim they would pay upwards of $700 for a PS5 Pro. Herman Hulst, is that you? Is that you, Shuhei, voting in this poll? Here is a poll to vote on for next episode. What is your favorite type of live service game? This is a more fun question to talk about. The Battle Royale, like Fortnite style. MOBAs like Dota 2. Sandbox games like GTA Online. MMOs like World of Warcraft. Card games like Marvel Snap or some other form of live service. Make sure to vote at IGN.com the day this episode goes live, and we'll share the results with you next episode. And that's going to do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Max and Destin. Thank you to everyone working behind the scenes in our Los Angeles office and studio here making this episode possible. My name is Daemon. We'll be back next week with more on the latest gaming hardware news. We'll see you then.